Content warning, abuse and misophonia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Claire's Space Talkathon. I'm your host, Claire, and today I have a recurring guest, my ma'am.
Hello.
And today, my ma'am, my co-host slash guest, my guest co-host would be the correct terminology, will be attempting to figure out what we're going to talk about today. Today's topic is a six-letter word. Six-letter word, and I'll let you know which letters are in the word, and I'll let you know if they are in the correct position or not. No, fuck off. My hair filter turned on.
It's a nice little jingle.
Right. Just to remind you that the air is no longer safe to breathe. Hey. Yeah, do you have a guess?
Well, let's just start with the first six-letter word that comes to mind. I guess this before, but flower.
Flower, you've definitely used flower
I don't
before.
know why, but when someone says name a six-letter word, that's when I come.
F is in the correct position.
No way.
Mm-hmm. L is in the incorrect position.
Okay.
O is not there, W is not there, E is not there, R is not there.
Okay. So F in the correct position, L someplace else.
Yep. So now use that information and trying to do some logical clues from there while I plug some stuff.
Okay.
If you like the channel, if you want to see more from me, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with any feedback. Also, if you subscribe, you'll be able to catch my live streams. I always do a live stream on Sundays at 11, but I also occasionally do live streams throughout the week. And the only time you're going to catch those is if you're subscribed. So, make sure to subscribe. Additionally, I'm on TikTok, so I do less of this more organized content. Very much not scheduled, but if you're interested, you can check me out on TikTok. You can also check me out on SoundCloud. I do music every now and then. I have I think like 10, something like that. Like 10 individual tracks right now. Alright, you have another guess?
Not yet. Still thinking. I can take my time.
The number of burps I have on this podcast is it's problematic.
It's your signature.
Yeah. Alright. You don't have any social media you want to plug, do you?
I've got a couple dog-related TikToks, but no, nothing I want to plug.
No, you don't want to show off Yoshi.
Mm-mm.
We have a dog named Yoshi. He's a very rambunctious fellow.
He's a special guy.
I was gonna say sweet, but then I remembered that he's a bastard.
He has just two different personalities.
I don't know if I've told the story of Yoshi on the podcast, so maybe we'll get to that.
Should we talk about Yoshi? I can talk about
No,
Yoshi. My guess is Yoshi.
Fuck off! God damn it!
Okay, this isn't a good guess, but at least it gets me some new letters. Falcon.
Falcon. I like it. Okay, Falcon. Falcon. The F is in the correct position.
Mm-hmm.
The A is in the correct position.
Ooh.
The L is in the incorrect position.
Still?
The C is not there.
No C.
The O isn't there.
Oh.
The N isn't there.
I knew there was no O, but I liked the word Falcon.
Okay, well, while you're thinking of that, I'll do a little bit more plugging. Mom, how much money have you made with Yada? Off the top of your head, if you can remember. What? Didn't you make like
$7 in one? Yeah, I had a really lucky week, and I got $7. I only have $25 invested in Yana.
And you made like $7.
I had been like mostly either making nothing or maybe 15 cents. One time I had 55. That was my previous high, and I was like 55 cents.
Right. So like $8 total. Right.
And then I had a really lucky week. I only had one ticket, but I won $7.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm up $7.55 right now.
Yeah. So essentially, Yada is a mobile banking service, YOTTA, on the App Store, Google Play, that allows you to save your money, $25 at a time, and you get, for every $25, you get a chance at $10 million every week. There's no required fees, and it's FDIC insured, so you're not going to lose any money. And you can take all your money out at any time. My experience, it takes a few days, but honestly, that's worth it, for free money. If you use code SWITCH, SWITCH, you will get 100 chances at 10 million during your first drawing. And you'll also be sending me some tickets as well, so you'll be supporting the channel. I greatly appreciate it if you do. Yeah, I mean, you have a guess, Mama? Mimi?
No.
Alright.
I'm still working it out.
Alright, then I'll finish up the spiel. So,
Okay, go ahead.
Yada is, it's also got, it's like a very, like, it's just savings, but in my experience, it's actually pretty effective, and I've made, I think $40 on it total, and haven't spent any money. So, it's been very good for me. Additionally, if you're a little bit risk averse, if you're not interested in the risk side of it, there is a feature called pools where you can join a pool, and the tickets will be, the earnings of the pool will be distributed based on how many tickets you put in. Tickets being those things that give you the chance at 10 million. So if the pool itself earns $10, and someone with one ticket happened to have the lucky ticket, but someone else put in 99, then you'll split it with, the one person getting 10 cents and the other person getting $9.90. So it would be more appropriate for how much you're putting in. So if you're interested in doing that, taking off a little bit of that risk, I have a pool with code SWITCH. I think it's like on one of the tabs of the website. It's like there's a little life saver icon, and it's like join a pool. And so you go in there, you put in password SWITCH, and you'll join. And you can, I have a few tickets in there, so you can reduce some of that risk.
Maybe I should do that.
Yeah.
Because I haven't played around with the pools yet.
I don't know how much you would make, but I mean, it doesn't really matter since we both kind of have shared finances anyways.
Yes.
But the point is that if you want to make money, and you, if you want to make a little bit of money and you don't want to have to put any effort in, I recommend signing up for Yada. Anyways, Mom, what's your next guess?
My guess is family.
Family is the topic. Family is today's topic. I want to talk about our family, your family, and my family.
Okay.
Some of our family history. I'll take that.
Family history, okay.
Yeah. So, starting off, we kind of covered this a little bit in the past, but you have not the best personal family history.
I mean, it could be worse. Like my family was. I always feel a little bit bad about complaining about my family because it could have been so much worse. But also, one of the things I've learned as an adult is that I have always minimized the issues that we had because that's what my family did. We always did that, and so to act like it was not that big of a deal. in comparison to other people, of course, there are always people who are worse, but that doesn't mean that my trauma is not valid or, important or, like, affects me. So, yeah, that's something that I've had to take into account, is that I tend to minimize my, the effects of the crappy stuff that
I think
happens.
that's what's important to talk about in this sort of public setting, is those situations where it's like, if I had more information, I would have been able to recognize I was in a bad situation.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing you're in a shitty situation is very different from thinking this is how everyone else is, and
Mm-hmm.
you're, being abused. So, just like, what was your pops like?
So,
Grandpa Card? No, William?
Yeah.
I can't remember your
Bill.
I can't remember your
You never
parents'
remember
names.
this. That's so
I remember
interesting.
Dad's parents'
Yeah.
names.
Yeah.
But,
Well, you spent more time with them when you were a bit older, a little bit.
Oh yeah, because they were and we talk about them way more.
Well, yeah, they're a little bit more.
Because
but
anyways,
both of my parents have passed away, of course, and then and my dad died when you were 8, I think.
8.
You were 8 years old.
Huh.
So your memories of him are probably pretty hazy.
What do you
remember?
I do have a very specific collection of memories about him. For instance, I remember one time we were out in public, and Bill and I were we had to go to the bathroom. At the time, 8 years old, Claire. I was not Claire. I was generally known as a boy, and so we went to the men's restroom. And I think I went to a stall, and he was using a urinal. I think that was like one of those things where I just didn't really feel comfortable with, and because public bathrooms have always been stressful for me, even pre-transition, and so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna hide in this stall and pee, and he's like, "You're pissing in there, boy!" That's the strongest memory I have. I don't think I responded.
Oh my god.
Because it was so fucking awkward, and we didn't talk about it later.
Well, that's very on brand for him.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's him to me, but also he's got a lot more going on.
So yeah, he was born in like the 30s. He was a pretty old dad. I think he was like 40 when I was born. So like compared to the other parents, and he had this like weird kind of old fashioned thing.
And you grew up in a Washington town that was very old fashioned.
It was like in the past,
So it was like old fashioned, but an old fashioned of old fashioned.
It was like they were trying to be in the 50s, like act like the changes of the 60s and 70s never happened. They didn't really touch. Oops.
That's fine.
Small town where I grew up. So they. Where was I?
So yeah, he was a bit older, 40 when you were born.
Yeah. So he had this other, he'd been married before. He was married. He married my mom.
Dude,
me.
how does he get more bitches than I do? What the fuck?
That's a good question. I don't understand it either.
How is he pulling so many bitches?
Crazy dude. So, he was he was married before and he had 3 kids.
Dude, actually, okay, before you continue, I just want to say, maybe that was his pickup line. He's like, "Hey, baby, you pissing in there?" And they're like, "Oh, William."
Gross. Okay, anyways. So,
you piss with that thing? You shit with that thing?
Okay. One thing that's very memorable, I guess, from growing up with him as my father was that he cared so much more for his sons. He cared, he was very hard on me and my older sister, who was from the, like the previous marriage, very hard on her, and very, very hard on like my other sister, who was his stepdaughter.
I think you could name them.
Okay, that might make it more. It's a complicated family, so
yeah. Don't name it then. Just,
I just mean like names would make it simpler in a way, but I'm not going to talk that much about that probably. Right. Just like there was the previous family of 3 kids that are quite a bit older than me, and when they got married, my mother already had a kid and gotten divorced, so they both had previous families, and then when they got married, had me. I lived with my sister that was my mom's kid that she kind of brought into the family. So he was hard on us, the 2 girls growing up. And it was us 2. And we would see those other siblings sometimes. They'd visit in the summers, that sort of thing, but we weren't very close to them. And so Dad would always talk about his boys and how amazing they were and how great they were. And he was really hard on us. He made fun of, anything that he could, really. Weight, looks. He just was very, very sexist. And so growing up that way, I very much internalized some misogyny. And it's like, it shows up all the time in my thinking, and it's really hard to shake. So there was that.
You just see boobs and you like...
Major.
Which, actually, I mean, is that even a joke? I mean, kind of.
I don't hate women. I feel ashamed to be one sometimes. Like, if only I were a man, then I'd be a real person. I don't know. There's just like it was weird though, because I actually, from a young age, also knew that was bullshit, and was like mad about. I was pretty young when I remember thinking that it was really stupid that there was only one girl Smurf. That was her whole personality. All the rest of them have a personality, and they're all default boys. And then there was one girl Smurf, and I was like, "What?" I knew that was wrong. So,
and her she has nothing other than I have the girl traits. The girl,
yeah. It was really dumb. Anyways, so
very one-dimensional femininity.
Yeah.
Being like, when you are these things, you are a girl, and if you have any depth to you whatsoever, you're a boy.
Yeah. There's only one thing a girl can be. A mom.
And so it's like...
a wife and mother.
So, you would notice that kind of stuff and be like, that seems wrong, but it still did get to you, subconsciously.
Totally. And, let's see, he also had, his family, he had a lot of mental illness, and he had some traits of mental illness. He was, kind of a, he wasn't schizophrenic like his mother and his aunt. He wasn't diagnosed, but they were.
Right.
So, it runs in our family. We have that trait, and it is genetic.
Slay.
But I think he had some of the traits. I looked into it one time, and I kind of think he had some schizoid traits. He was paranoid sometimes.
Oh yeah,
that was one of the
paranoid schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm. He had a tendency to paranoia that was a little beyond what you might expect.
Well, I mean, you've told me many stories, but I think what first immediately comes to mind is the story of him guarding the driveway.
Yeah, he had the driveway, a long driveway. He had it resurfaced, and he spent a bunch of money on, having it resurfaced, and it had to dry for 24 hours or something. And so he set up some sawhorses to block the way, because where their place was, it was possible to use the driveway, the beginning of it, as sort of a turnaround. So he really didn't want anybody to drive on it while it was drying, and he was just really. He was so worried about it that the sawhorses weren't enough. He spent the evening guarding it with a gun. Yeah. He sat out there with a gun.
Like, his plan would be, if someone shows up and tries to pull in, he would shoot them.
Apparently. Yeah.
Somehow.
It was very troubling. That happened after I moved out. That was later, but it
and
was,
and
it was
he
concerning.
definitely, his condition didn't improve over time.
He changed over time, but I don't think his condition improved. It just changed. It morphed. Because like he was an asshole growing up. He was so mean, so mean. He was mean to my mom and me and my sister, especially my sister, because step kid. He was like, he thought of her as really not his, and he, even though they had talked about him adopting her, and I don't think it ever happened. It was talked about, but he didn't.
So like legally,
yeah, like he was like, I'll take care of her or whatever, but I'm not her dad.
I thought that was not. Wow.
Yeah, no, he never did. They talked about it in like high school, and there was even talk of her changing her name, but she didn't. Like she didn't. It was funny because I actually remember this really well. In high school, when she got her Letterman's jacket, because I think she did track. I think that was her sport, and she got a Letterman's jacket. And I remember in the lining, it actually said his last name. It was like during that period where it was like, okay, we're gonna adopt you, and you're gonna take the last name, but then it never happened.
Right, like nowadays, it's not his last name.
No, well, she went back to her maiden name for a while, went between marriages, but now she's taken her second husband's name. No. Anyways, so no, we never had the same last name.
Okay, I'm sure I've said this before on the podcast, and if I haven't, then it just hasn't come up. I'm all in favor of when you marry someone, you together come up with a new last name.
Yeah, I definitely would never,
because that's so much easier.
I would never choose to take my husband's name again, like if I had to do over again. That's cringe. Yeah. Would never do it.
Like I'm like I don't get bitches, but if I did, I would be like, yeah, baby, let's go on Rhyme Zone and come up with a last name.
I know people who've done that. It's better in a lot of ways. It's better than hyphenation because it avoids all those long names. And then what do? If two people who have hyphenated last names decide to get married, what do? Like it just gets a little wacky. But the problem with choosing a new name is it's going to be difficult for genealogists in the future. They're going to be like, how do I trace this family? You know what I'm saying?
Oh, it's not that hard these days.
I'm kind of kidding, but anyways.
Also, for context for the people at home, I'm currently wearing these VR goggles without the front on.
It gives you the distinct appearance of Wall-E. That's what it looks like.
Can you see my eyes through it?
Not really. No.
There's this one meme from back in the day of, I think it was H3, from Ethan Klein from H3, having VR goggles and his eyes were poking out and they looked really big and it was really funny. Fortunately, he's kind of sus, but anyways.
Okay, so
listen, I have a short attention span, so I have to do things.
I understand, me too. So yeah, my dad was mean.
Yeah, so
sometimes I replay in my head the things that hurt me the most that he said to me, but it's very unpleasant, and I try to remember that he was a pretty messed up dude. And
well, we can talk about another specific example if it's not too bad about the apple.
Oh, he was the beginning of my misophonia?
Yep.
That part? Yeah.
Oh, actually, first, for the people at home who might not know, talk a little bit about your misophonia.
Oh, so I have misophonia. It is an extreme...
I don't mean to command you.
No,
but,
that's fine. It's an extreme irritation to certain sounds that are repetitive. A lot of times it's mouth sounds or body sounds. Things that people...
The sound of my wife not shutting the fuck up, am I right?
No, the sounds of things like sniffing, coughing, sore throats, chewing, gum popping, gum chewing, things like that. So, it's like a known thing now, but man, when I was a kid, I never heard of it. Nobody talked about it. The only reason that I know what it is or that it has a name is because of the internet. So people were like sharing their stories. Like, does anybody else have this? And people, because nobody wants to talk about it. There's this really obnoxious thing that some people do, where if you tell them that something bothers you, then they do it more. So people were quiet about it for the most part, and then when they found the internet, they were able to talk to each other. And that's a whole nother episode, honestly. I have a lot to say about misophonia.
And just one last thing is that personally, I didn't get it at the time, and I did that shit where you would be like, hey, that's annoying when I'm chewing my gum, and I would chew my gum louder because I was an annoying little kid.
It's a thing people do, even if they're like not evil, or if they're not jerks.
I was evil as a kid.
It's just something that people do, they're like, it's like they think it's funny, or they don't understand how painful it is. It's an extremely like debilitating, it's not irritation like, oh, that bugs me. It's like, I can't, I'm gonna get it, I don't know what to do, I gotta get out of here. I either have to punch you in the face or run away, and there's no in between. It's really rough. So, have
you ever attacked someone over misophonia?
No, I'm more of the flight.
Are you planning on attacking someone?
Flight versus fight. Actually, there's fight, flight, freeze, and I have often been frozen in place by my misophonia. But it provokes that response. It's very strange. It's just like a weird neurological condition, and people who have it report the exact same symptoms, onset, age of onset. It's very we don't understand why, but we know a lot about it now, and it's becoming more of a studied and recognized thing. Thank God, because it's miserable.
Mm-hmm.
So my dad was the first person who triggered that in me with the apple. He used to eat apples with he had broken his nose or something when he was younger, and he had a little bit of a crooked nose, something wrong with it, and he would breathe really heavily through his nose when he was eating, because otherwise I think he'd breathe through his mouth. His nose, I don't know, didn't quite work right. So he would get a hold of an apple and just be like munching on it with this is a trigger warning for people.
Trigger warning, misophonia.
Seriously, it's because it can be really upsetting to even hear about it if you have it. Chewing and breathing loudly through his nose, and it made the most god awful sounds I'd ever heard. And
even though technically they were just little,
they're just it's quiet. Noises. It's not terrible. I mean, someone else might be kind of vaguely disgusted.
But even then, that's more of a social thing to be like, right, chew with your mouth closed and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Less this sound is making me feel like there's a predator around.
Right, yeah.
I'm being threatened.
I think the current thinking, this is probably super simplistic, but the current thinking is that it's kind of a short circuit in your brain. It's instead of going through the normal channels, it's being directed straight to your lizard brain, where you feel like you gotta get the hell out, and but we don't know why, and there's no cure, so we try to deal with it. But yeah, once it gets started, so he was the first one, and then once it gets started, it just gets worse every time you hear it. Then you begin to hear other noises. Most people end up developing many different triggers, and that's what happened to me. And it started when I was about 8, which is a really common age. Between 7 and 12 is where most people say it starts happening to them. So, and if I said anything, oh my God, there was no sensitivity whatsoever for me being bothered by this. The worst possible situation. He was like, I'm just eating an apple. What are you talking about? Which is understandable, but also I couldn't really express just how much it bothered me, or even my mom would say, and my mom was nice, and my mom would say, you're too sensitive, just get over it. Which is what almost everyone who has misophonia hears from their loved ones. So, it's rough.
What about, and here's another thing to talk about. So, from my experience, your mom was a pretty chill grandma type.
Yeah.
But obviously it's more than that. It's not just she was the good parent.
Well, my parents were different. as they, when you knew them from when they were younger, certainly. My mom was a good parent. She tried really hard, but she also, and she was very sweet, kind, and almost always, she loved us, and we knew that. And, the problem with being in a relationship like that, when you're sweet and kind and you're married to someone who's a jerk, is that you are always being trampled over, and that was what I saw growing up. I just saw like this monster, really. My dad in a lot of ways was a monster, and I don't know how much you want to get into what he did, but the stuff that made me really,
I mean,
like
stuff. If you're comfortable talking about it, go for it.
okay. He was physically abusive to mostly my sister, sometimes me, but way more her because she was the step kid and he just never really accepted her as his own and, didn't treat her the same. So some me, but whenever I think back, it's like I see the stuff that I remember, the really bad stuff, it was her getting hit, pushed down, like beat up in front of me. And some of that stuff is really vivid in my memory, and it was very, very traumatic to see her.
Did you ever talk to your sister about this stuff?
I tried to talk to her one time, and she wasn't ready, and she got really upset. And we have, in the more recent past, talked about it, though. I think she's gotten to a place where, like, not in detail, but, like, just kind of vaguely, she's okay with expressing and acknowledging, like, I was there too, and I remember that, and that was terrible. And that's, like, kind of as far as we've gotten. But it's better. The first time I brought it up, she flipped out. It was a long time ago. Like, when her kids were little, so, and they're, like, 30 now, so. It was a long time ago, and she just wasn't ready to talk about it. So, but yeah, there's a very particular memory. It's so weird, it's so dumb, but I'm kind of triggered by Cheese Whiz because, that stuff, it's like cheese in a jar. Because I remember one time that she was used to eat Cheese Whiz and celery a lot. That was like a snack we liked as kids. And there was a jar of it on the floor in front of the TV, like she'd been sitting there eating from, putting it into her celery sticks and eating it, snacking. And it was still sitting there by the TV, and I remember him pushing, I don't know what they were fighting about, I remember nothing about that, but I just remember him pushing her, and all that, like, clattered over the knife, and the Cheese Whiz jar, like, fell over, and he was, like, on top of her, on that floor next to the TV, and I remember seeing that, and just being, like, felt like my world was shattering, so I'm a little bit, it's my, like, that one, and the time that he punched her face and made her nose bleed, and I remember seeing the blood in the snow. So they're like these two images of like that Cheese Whiz jar on the ground and them struggling and fighting and me and my mom not knowing what to do, and then the time in the snow. He was just like, he would get mad at her because she wouldn't put up with his shit, Like he didn't, like she would try to stand up to him because she tried for herself. She would try to stand up for herself. And he thought she was being a smart mouth. He would call her that. And he would get so mad that he would sometimes like beat her. It was crazy. I do remember getting beaten by him one time. Like, I'm on the floor cowering and he's standing over me, and there were punches or hits or probably slap. I don't know. It's really vague. So yeah, but I was, my sister and I were abused by our dad.
And like that's that was the standard for most people, from most of history, I'd say.
It's
most
weird.
Of human history.
What did I hear recently about the generational trauma of like the war? It was about World Wars I and II and the wars of the 20th century, and there being all this like trauma that men brought home and then like took out on their families. So I wonder about that too. And
Was he a veteran?
he was in the military, but he wasn't in a war. I'm not sure. I don't think his dad was, but it was talking about like the years, the generations of like. Actually, his dad probably was. He would have been the right age.
Yeah, and it could have been,
I don't know,
passed down to him.
I don't know. It's all just supposition, but yeah, there was this idea for a long time, and who knows how long back, or in which some cultures are this way, and I suppose some are not, where the only way to assert your dominance and make sure that you're respected is physical violence against your wife and children. Which now we think of it as abuse, because it is. And it's terrible. It's terrifying to live with someone like that. You're scared of them. So that means that your house is a place of fear. Which our house was a place of fear, let me tell you. It was bad. We hated it when he came home from work. It was like nice when he wasn't there. It was pleasant. We were just like living our lives. And then he'd come home from work, and then it was all about what he wanted. He wanted the TV on at full volume. That's what he got. He wanted dinner, and this is what he wanted, and that's what he got. And we weren't supposed to get in his way or bother him in any way. Like, we just had to shut up and leave him alone.
Which at that point, that's not a family. Those are slaves. You've enslaved a woman to serve you. Yeah. And to birth your children, and then have them serve you as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just stayed away from him mostly. Like,
that's the way that many people have lived their lives.
I know. It's horrible. I try to be away, just like get away from him, not, but And that's my sister used to spend a lot of time with my aunt and uncle. Like, we had cousins about around the same age, and she would go over there for whole weekends because he had weekends off, and he would be home. And if they were together, they would get in too many fights. So she ended up spending many, many weekends away with my aunt and uncle. Yeah. And anyways, one of my proudest moments as a teenager was when I called him an asshole to his face.
Nice.
It's great. Felt good.
What did he do?
What did he do? I don't even remember. This is a different incident, but I remember one time when I was a teenager, he got mad at me, and he raised his hand up like he was gonna slap me in the face, and he scratched my face with his watch. Like, he was like, and it like right here. He scratched my face with his watch, and then he held his hand up like he was gonna slap me across the face. And I was just like, what? And he dropped it, and I ran down the road to my friend's house and just stayed there for like the next few hours.
Because you didn't give. You didn't give. You didn't heed his
whatever. Well, I don't know what it was in that case. What made him so
like
mad.
Just as simple as like his face. I mean, your face. Like, he wanted you to be like, to get back to your like, oh, I'm scared.
Yeah, I just looked at him. I remember just staring at him like, are you really gonna slap me? Because it had been a long time since he had done anything like that, and I was like, I remember running and crying with my friend and talking about what happened, and it was like a refuge. My friend's house. That was cool. Yeah. They were an awesome family.
Yeah,
where people didn't do things like that to each other.
The whole, like that whole concept is very reminiscent of like feudalism and slave capitalism, which I don't think I've ever heard that term before, but that's what the U.S. was for a long time, and still kind of is, with like prison labor and immigrant labor and outsourced labor. Like slave capitalism, where it's like everyone, it's a free market where everyone makes their own decisions unless you're enslaved to prop up that market. And it's like,
and the market doesn't work without that.
Exactly.
Free or
and
very
so
cheap labor.
You have the people who are the assholes in charge, your pops, and then you have the people that are complicit, your mom, and then you have the victims, you and your sister.
My mom was a victim too, though.
I mean,
well, let me tell you.
I'm not saying that being complacent doesn't mean you're a victim. Okay. Complacent victim.
Yeah. Well, the thing about my mom, and I used to say this for years, like, why didn't you just leave him? Why? Like, I know why she married him. She was pregnant with me. That happened. And there wasn't a whole lot of options. She had a 5-year-old kid. She was pregnant with me.
And it's not like you could get an abortion at that time.
You couldn't, actually. Roe v. Wade was a year after I was born.
Like, yeah, you literally couldn't.
You literally couldn't. Or without... Yeah, well, I don't think she would have anyway. Very religious and all that.
Right.
Anyways, basically, she had no choice but to marry my dad. And she always said he was different then. Of course, he was. I'm sure. He changed over the course of his lifetime. When he was younger, he was nicer. When he first met her and he was trying to woo her, of course he was nice to her. And then they got married and he changed and he became all Lord of the Manor and you're going to do this for me and I don't care about your kid. It was. I felt really bad for her, and
right, because it's like, oh, I can find the man he used to be in there somewhere.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. She always thought that she was pretty much trapped there, and I asked my aunt about it one time because the only information that I ever got about anything was from my aunt. The family history stuff my mom just wouldn't talk about. Like I didn't even know that they got married because of me. I hadn't really realized the dates until I saw it in there's this family genealogy thing. I have to find that for you. I'll dig that out. But she was doing research. This was a long time ago though. I was like 10 years old. And she was doing some family research. She was interested in genealogy and the dates were right there in front of me. Their anniversary and my birthday. And I was like, that's only 6 months. And I look at her, I'm like, Mom, because that was very not good in our family. It was, you didn't do things like that. Your mom was, a perfect Christian woman who would never do anything like that. Which was
before marriage,
ridiculous. But at the
time,
I know
the goal.
Yeah, this is the mindset in which I grew up. So
that's always put on her, of course. So she was like, how dare she do that?
Right? I know. So anyways, I didn't know any of this. And I asked my aunt one time why they stayed together. What is it that, she had family around. She had support. Why didn't she just get away from him? He was so terrible. And she said that she tried to, and he threatened her with a gun if she left. I assume threatened us with a gun. Maybe, the threat would have been directed toward her, but she had us 2 kids as well, and I don't have any memory of this. I didn't see it myself, but
right. It's like, I will kill you and your children, I guess.
So that's what my aunt told me, and it was like, everything makes sense.
Is your aunt dead?
No. She's around.
Oh my gosh, can I get her on the podcast?
She'll probably love that because she likes to talk and tell stories, and she's really easy to talk to. That'd be cool.
Oh my god! Okay, I know the aunt now. I know the aunt we're talking about.
That story is weird and it's really kind of vague. And I know she told me this one time, but I don't know the particulars of it. I would love to know more about that. Anyways, so yeah, she felt trapped because he was so threatening. Yeah. And literally threatened them. Yeah. And it was definitely something that he might carry out. He was he was unhinged. Saying he's crazy, that's not a very kind, polite
or accurate, because it's oftentimes used as a expression. But no, he literally needed psychiatric assistance.
Yeah, that's much.
He was not able to function.
He was mentally ill and needed help. And I wish that one of the things that really, we always talked about it. It was just a given in our household that it was true, that he needed professional help, but he would never admit that he needed it. Mm-hmm. When he wasn't around, we were all like, we all know that he really needs to get some help.
And all of this is very common in a lot of traditional masculinity, of being assertive in the house, and dominating, your partner, again, you imposing your will against them, even if you don't necessarily want to ensure your position in power.
Oh yeah. He was into all that.
Which again also directly parallels with the concept of feudal lords being yeah, I don't need to demand another, week's worth of rations this week. but I'm going to keep people in check.
Mm.
And also, like, the concept of, like, the man just refusing to think about their own issues in a way that's any way progressive. Just being like, okay, this is who I am, and this is the way things are, and the only things I'm ever going to change are to fit the status quo.
One thing I learned. How much do we have time to finish with the
Um,
story?
We have 15 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
One thing I learned about my dad later on ish, like when I was a teenager, I learned about his family history and what happened to him growing up, and that was really fucked up too. So, that was a lot of his trauma and issues. Of course, it's always generational, but like his mom, who was schizophrenic, who was hospitalized, like long term institutionalized for it, when when he was little, he had two sisters, and they lived on the same property, where I grew up and where you visited when you were young. He grew up there, and his father and his uncle lived there. They were twin brothers, and his mom left the family. She just like fell in love with somebody and took off. So he was really mad at her about that. He held a huge, grudge kind of against all women, I think. I think that was where like a lot of his sexism came from. He hated women.
Like misdirected like guilt.
Yeah, well, misdirected anger and shame and just
or
all sorts of
like
things.
grief. I would say like losing
Yeah.
a parent in that way. Not
Yeah.
even if they're not dead, it has a similar effect of being like, oh, this person's outside my life, and channeling that into like really negative, active emotion.
He was only 7 when she left,
Yeah.
and she moved up the road. It wasn't even like she went that far. And she would try to like see them sometimes, and like she didn't just leave. It was a very like rocky and like complicated, really awful abandonment. Like I kind of want to be your mom, but no. And so I don't know. I think that was worse, and rather a clean break might have been better, because she would always try to like reinsert herself. But she didn't really want to have anything to do with them.
Yeah, like legally, was she detached from them?
I don't know exactly. I know they got divorced. The parents got divorced.
That's a question to ask your aunt.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I actually have.
Next episode of the podcast,
because my dad was
Zoom with her.
My dad was into family history, and he has a binder that he gave me a copy of for some reason. It's the divorce papers for his parents, so there might be something in there. He was into that stuff, but he was like, let me just finish.
Yeah.
So he was like, super, abandonment issues, history of mental illness, raised by his father and the twin brother, uncle, and the two sisters he had. They got shipped off when the mother left to like an aunt who lived like maybe half an hour away or something like that. So like it was like the parents, the uncle and father didn't want to raise the girls, or didn't feel like they could, and so his family was cut in half. Like
he was like separated from all of the women in his life.
All of the women in his life,
all at once.
Yes.
Wow.
I know, it's really bad.
Holy shit. That's some Joker shit.
I know, it was really awful.
Oh my god.
So bad. And when I learned all this, I was like, okay, I kind of feel sorry for him. And he wasn't all bad. He did have some good characteristics. He wasn't always terrible. And he got way mellower in his old age. And he was quite pleasant sometimes. But damn, when he was younger, he was an asshole. And that's like the root of it, I think. Was that he was just... His whole childhood was just crushed at this one act, and a series of decisions after it. It was really bad.
Yeah.
And then one of his sisters died when she was really young. Also, she got tuberculosis, died of that. She was about 20, and then he was kind of close-ish, with his other sister, but she had schizophrenia and was like really, she had a difficult life. She was in and out of institutions. But he would go and visit her, and there was some connection there, at least.
Yeah.
He tried to take care of her and help her out. But she was, that particular aunt, I remember. I have a lot of interesting memories about her. She was a very troubled person. Anyways,
do you know what the relationship with your grandfather, right? Would that be correct?
Yeah.
And what was the relationship with him and his former wife, great grandma?
So, do you
the
mean
one who moved down the street?
What was their relationship like?
Yeah,
well, I don't know. It can't have been good, I guess, but I don't know
right.
anything
Like
about
why?
It.
That would be my question. Is like maybe they had a similar situation to dude.
Yoshi.
Maybe they had a similar situation to him.
Very
your dad
possibly.
and your mom.
Yeah, I didn't know my grandfather. He died in the 60s before I was born. So I didn't know him at all, and I didn't hear a lot of stories about him. But I know that he was pretty, he was of a different time for sure. I've seen pictures of the old days, and they were like poor farmers, living.
Yeah, that picture of the dude with the little like pitchfork in front of the little house.
That was them, but like barefoot in their like dirt yard, the old pictures of them are pretty rustic. And I'm pretty old-fashioned, and I imagine... I don't know anything, though. I don't know anything about him. His name was Elmer. And I knew his twin brother. I remember him, because he was alive when I was young, and we'd go and see him at the nursing home. And he was pretty grizzled. Like, he'd been around, he'd seen things. He was kind of a grumpy old man kind of person. But he was, nice enough. He was all right. So I imagine that Elmer was probably a little bit like that. Elmer, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And then, and just to wrap things up, because, we have like 8 minutes, but, like, what about your mom's family? Like, her parents?
They were fantastic. It's funny because they both lived in the same town, but sort of on like opposite ends, and they were completely different people, and they had different lives. So like, my mom's parents, I kind of remember my grandmother, but not very well because she died when I was 4. But she was like a secretary for like the school principal, and worked there for years, decades, her whole career, and was like much beloved kind of person. She was I think a little tough on her kids. I think she was kind of a tough love kind of mom. Seemed like she was pretty strict. And my grandpa, whom I do remember, he was great. He was fantastic. Very loving, very sweet. My mom, I never heard an unkind word about him. Everyone has nothing but good things to say. He was just a good guy, and he was wonderful. When he passed away, that was a real struggle for me. I really suffered. Missing, losing him, and that was tough. That was the first thing that first real like person that I truly, really loved, who I lost, and he was really, really cool. So, I had a good grandparent figure, which was nice. I think I wish I could have known Grandma. My sister remembers her, but I don't really. So, they were cool. He was an auto mechanic, my father, or my grandfather. So, on one side they were like farmers, and then on the other side they lived in town, and they had like town type jobs, working at the school, working at the auto shop. City folk.
Taking care of your children.
And
cringe!
We know a lot about their family. They had lived different places. All the genealogy stuff goes way back and talks about where they came from. And same with, on the other side, my father's side, things were more recent. They were more recent immigrants. But on my mother's side, they'd been in like, the United States for a long, long time. Moved all around and stuff. So they were very different.
You mentioned earlier something about how, like, in the past you would minimize stuff.
Yeah.
That's a term that came specifically from your therapist, right? Because you used to do therapy.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the term, but it was the idea of not comparing your own trauma to other people's.
Right. And minimizing
And
your
minimizing.
struggles.
I don't know if that term, like you said, but I remember her saying that because I would always start with, well, it could have been worse. I definitely, was luckier than a lot of people, and and she was always like, don't do that,
Unnecessary.
Like it's like
inaccurate.
that doesn't mean that you're gonna poke a hole in
I
your
am going to.
shoe.
Anyways, continue.
So it doesn't mean that yours isn't important, valid, affects you, and that you you don't have to have had the world's worst childhood to be affected by a bad childhood.
Yep.
And the reason that you want to recognize the effects of your childhood is so that you can recognize the bad thinking patterns that you get into when you have kind of, been raised this way. And also like the physical things that can happen to you. There are physical markers that are left by trauma. It's more than we recognize. Just start scratching the surface and understanding what trauma does to you.
Yeah, and I mean that plays into like the whole concept of neuroplasticity, where like those events that happen early in your life and keep happening over and over, they rip apart your brain and build it around that. Yeah. And then leaving that environment and being like, oh, now you're not being abused. Your brain isn't wired for it.
You're like expecting to be.
That's why a lot of that's why there's like that connection between the wars and traumatic family situations, because a lot of soldiers were they were not given any treatment for their post-traumatic stress disorder, and so they just kind of had to deal with their weird emotional outbursts and stuff and never really talk about it.
Yep. Drown their sorrows and
in booze and beating your wife.
Yeah. Sadly, yes.
The few pleasures of a man.
Well, yeah. And some people think, actually, going back to misophonia, there's a theory that maybe it's trauma-induced. Like, you're traumatized, you're expecting to be under threat, and then your brain finds a way to be under threat, but that's kind of been debunked. It's not true. There are many people who are like, nope, I had a perfect childhood, it just started happening to me one day. And they, it's not just, it's not just that. It may play into it, but it's not just that.
Right. Like the severity of it could be affected by like how you're like it's like the response you have in general to panic. Yeah.
There seems to be a wiring thing.
Right.
And I think that it ran in my family. I know of one uncle and one cousin who have misophonia, or had. They both passed away, actually. But,
yeah. Well.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah, we have a little bit of time.
I want to say that to finish the story of Grandpa Bill, the grandpa that you knew, you pissing in there?
You pissing in there, boy!
He was kind of known in his later years for the goofy stuff he would do and say. And he would he didn't really have any friends. He was so weird, and he just people pretty put off by him because he was so weird.
Because he worked as a postman.
He was a postman for years. Yes.
Right. He didn't work in a job with other people.
Exactly. But he loved to talk to people. So if you were around and you were a captive audience, he wouldn't shut up. So your dad has a lot of stories of Bill. Because when we'd hang out, I would talk to my mom.
And he would talk
and he'd be stuck with my dad. And yeah. So his stories were funny. There was a really famous one. I think the funniest one, because my dad got goofy. He wasn't mean anymore when he was old. He was just weird. Which was nice. It was a nice change, It was good to see that go out of him. He drove Mom crazy. She would always complain about him. And even it was better, but still, up until the very end, she complained about the way that he acted. but he got nicer anyway. But the story that was so funny, he had colon cancer, and he needed surgery for it, and there was all this treatment that had to happen before and during, after this. That whole time was difficult, lots of doctor visits or whatever, and he had surgery and he was okay. So he was cured of colon cancer. That's not what he died from, but he had to give himself enemas, and he
Oh, did he detail it to?
He was
to
detailing it. He was telling your father, my husband, when we were visiting, that exactly what he had to do to give himself an enema before this procedure, and whatever, daily enemas or something, and he got down on all fours and demonstrated.
Oh God! Now I remember. He demonstrated an enema,
and he had these weird mispronunciations that he thought that they were totally correct.
And that's something that my dad still does. Is that he still mispronounce things the way that your dad says it.
So specifically, it was anise and sphinster.
Now you see the anise. See this
you gotta get it up there in the sphinster.
Oh God, so fucking gross. Ugh.
It was so weird, but so.
Kooky old abusive man.
He was a very complicated human being for sure, and it was hard to be raised by him. But that's the way it goes sometimes.
The moral of the story is that if you find yourself in a shitty family situation, go to therapy.
Yeah, for sure.
And reach out to a family member, because you were saying aunts and friends and stuff.
I learned a lot from specifically that my one. She told me a lot of things that helped me understand what was going on. Really, not just from my perspective or the little bit that I heard, knowing more about it. I'm sure this was something that it was good.
Yeah.
Talk to people.
Yeah, talk to people. And go to therapy. Thank you all so much for listening to today's episode of the podcast.
Thank you.
If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe, but let us know what you think about it in the comments. Follow me on TikTok, check out my SoundCloud, sign up for Yotta, YOTTA, using code SWITCH, SWITCH. And if you're subscribed, you'll see my special live streams. But if you're not subscribed, don't worry. You can always tune in on Sundays at 11 Pacific Daylight Time. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye. Don't be abused. And if you do, tell me about it. Guys, make sure to leave a comment if you are actively being beat by your parents.
Oh my God.
I'm getting. This is how I get canceled.